Section 3, Chapter 8, A Closed Book. On the morning I left, I said goodbye to Mr. Bauer and Mr. Casey. They had been so helpful. Without them, my stay would have been much longer and my life much different. I went down to the discharge closet and picked out some clothes. I chose a clean-cut look, no super-fly outfits, no cowboy duds, no black leather, rebel without a cause rags, no fake orange fur, just plain pair of dark slacks, a white shirt with a button-down collar, and a jacket with patches on the elbows. I looked like a librarian, and that was fine with me. In my yellow cell, I filled a brown cardboard suitcase with my belongings and carried it down to the discharge office for station for my final inspection. The guard put my suitcase on a table and flipped it open. He was good at searching things. He had strip searched me many times. He set aside my 2 pairs of prison underwear, 2 pairs of socks, 2 round-neck white t-shirts, a pair of sneakers, a pair of work boots, gloves, and a wool cap. I also had a drawing pad and colored pencils, a manila envelope with important prison and parole papers, and my copy of The Brothers Karamazov. The guard picked the book up by the spine and tapped on the table as if he were shaking sand from a shoe. But nothing came out. He flipped open the jacket and saw the prison library seal. "This is the prison's copy," he said. "It belongs here." He set it to the side. And I couldn't say anything. The prison seal was stamped in blue ink for both of us to see. My heart was beating wildly. I had to keep that book. My entire identity as a writer was in that book. Everything I had written was squeezed between Dostoevsky's great lines, as if my words were his discards. But they were all I had. "It's my favorite book," I said to the guard. "I'll pay for it. I've been given $40 in travel money along with my bus ticket. I'll sell it to you," he said. "I'd like to, but I can't. It's prison property." I looked down at my feet and kept my mouth shut. I wondered if he'd give it to me if I said it was in my journal, or if, like the ship's log, it would only be used against me, and I'd be marched right back to my cell and locked until my sentence expired. I was just so nervous to be this close to the door that I zipped my lip. I looked up and I smiled, and I turned away when he threw it in a return bin. I heard it hit with a thud. That journal was the one and only thing that I loved about prison. I knew I'd always have my memory, but my heart was in that book. I was driven to the bus station by a minimum security con called Pittsburgh. We checked the schedule. My bus was going to be 2 hours late. "I can't leave you here," Pittsburgh said. "Town law. Don't want no cons loitering. Gotta take you back." It made me sick to my stomach to have to go back. I offered Pittsburgh $10 of my $40 travel allowance, and he snapped up 10. "You're on your own," he said, and sped away. I sat on a bench and waited, wondering if the discharge guards would discover my journal and read enough of it to send a search team to come and get me. Once I boarded the bus and we got underway, I just looked out the window and watched the country roll by. It was a joy to have a window that moved. It was a joy to have a new thought. And then I had a funny realization that I really didn't lose my journal entirely, that between the lines of the new, free thoughts were compressed the secret memories of my days in prison, and that made me feel better. When I arrived in New York, I took a cab from 42nd Street to Mulberry Street, where Gabe Virgilio's mother lived. She was expecting me. She had food waiting. She showed me to my room, which was small but had a street view, and I loved the room with its old flowered wallpaper and lace dollies on every surface. I put my cheap suitcase on the bed. "Do you have more luggage?" she asked sweetly. "No, this is it," I replied. "Well, so few things," she said. "You'll need to wash your laundry very often. You just give your clothes to me, and I'll take care of that for you." I wanted to kiss her. She was so kind. After I ate too much dinner and moved some furniture around for her and took down the trash, I went to meet her other son, who had a job waiting for me. He was just as kind. And suddenly, in 2 days, I went from x-raying convicts with broken bodies to selling Christmas trees in Little Italy. And everyone seemed happy. People were nice to me. On the Christmas tree lot, we had hot coffee with Sambuca in it, and it was cookies and calzones and pizza and pasta and every wonderful food I could want. The good cheer of the holiday season was in everyone, and I was in heaven, and I laughed about it. I kept looking around thinking, I've made it. I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. And I'd eat some more, and I'd talk to people who came to buy trees and play with their kids, and I found myself going up to complete strangers saying, "Can I help you?" Instead of imagining that every stranger was a danger. Part of my job was to deliver the trees to the apartments. The last job I had in New York was pushing a shopping cart full of drugs down the street to people's apartments. Now I was pushing a shopping cart with a Christmas tree on it. I laughed like a loony at the nutty irony, and when I carried and tugged the tree 3 or 4 or 5 flights up the stairs, I laughed. Nothing could get me down. It was also comical and so joyful. When the January semester began, I got my money from the Newman from Mr. Newman and went to school. After his fees and the $1,000 I gave my father, I had just enough to cover the first semester. I paid cash, but I needed spending money, so I got a work-study job at the school. They made me a security guard. At night, I'd walk through the deserted school buildings, checking doors and windows. I had time clock to punch at various checkpoints around my rounds. Each time I punched my card, I shouted, "Count." In my writing classes, I first wrote brutal stories about prison, about New York street life, and the men I knew who had hard lives and hard hearts. And then one day I got tired of the blood and the guts and hard lives and hard hearts and began to write more stories about my childhood, like the ones I had started writing down in prison. Stories which, at one time, I did not think were important, but suddenly had become to me the most important stories of all. They contained the hidden days of my innocence and happiness. And once I began retrieving the lost pleasures of my childhood, I began to write stories for children. And I laughed about that too. Prison certainly wasn't funny, but with each day, it was receding into my past. The mistakes I had made, the pain I endured, the time I wasted were now the small parts of me. But no matter how small, it wouldn't entirely go away. One night I was lying in my bed in Mr. Virgilio's house reading when I glanced up from the book to the ceiling, and the naked light bulb suddenly reminded me of the man with the bulb busted up his ass, and I got a surge of anxiety. Hopped up, looked out the window as if the anxiety was tailing me like the feds had, but no one was down there. I turned and I saw my razor on the dresser. I grabbed my shoes and I darted out of the room and I took a walk. Every now and again, an anxious moment like that comes back, but not often to prepare for, so I got caught up in it until I shake it off. I never returned to dig up the hash. I was broke and exhausted. With a heavy schedule between my work and college, I needed money. I could have recovered the hash, cut it into grams, and sold it piecemeal, and it would have been about $5,000 worth. Once, to be honest, I got as far as the drinking fountain. 39 steps, 20 steps, 15 steps, I said to myself, but my feet wouldn't move. My heart wasn't in it. I would not let myself make that kind of mistake again. No matter how desperate I was for money, I knew giving in would reveal that I was desperate on the inside in an even worse way, and I wasn't. Not anymore. Now, every time I pass the Plaza Hotel in General Sherman, I smile. And once, by chance, I walked by Lucas's old apartment, but I didn't stop. Not only would it have been a parole violation to see him or Hamilton again, but I didn't want to dig them up either. I did get the ship's logs back. A year later, I had Newman request my court records, and the login files were sent to me. But the Karamazov's journal is gone. It was the biggest loss of writing I'd ever suffered, and since then I'd never lost a journal. Now I wonder if that volume is still on the prison library shelf. I hope so. That thought sustains me. I imagine some prisoner checking it out and reading my book within the book, and maybe he will add his thoughts to it, and maybe others will too. Maybe the library will become filled with books with trapped worlds of prisoners' thoughts concealed between the lines. What remains of the rotted hash is hidden in the hole I dug for it, and I'm out in the open doing what I have always wanted to do, write.